So as we said, as I've said before, we're quoting Shanti Deva, there's nothing whatsoever that is not made easier through acquaintance. So through becoming acquainted with the small harms, I should learn to patiently accept greater harms. So we're going to start our practice. Let me put a timer on. I haven't got a bell with me, so I'll use a timer. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Right, our first direction of forgiveness is towards others. Asking others for forgiveness, or more correctly, expressing our own regrets, skillful remorse, and forgiving ourselves for not knowing better. So we express remorse and forgive ourselves for the hurt and harm we've caused others. So we can start our practice by just imagining that we're breathing in and out through our heart. We can place our hand on our heart if it helps. And wherever it is in our body, in our chest, that we imagine our heart to be, we take a very deep breath in through the heart and a long, slow breath out through the heart. And a second very deep breath in through the heart. And a long, slow breath out through the heart. And we can recite, if we're practicing with real examples, we can recite the following phrases like a silent whisper in the back of our mind. I ask others for forgiveness for whatever harmful things I have done, the mistakes, the failures, and the wrongdoings that I have intentionally or unintentionally done with my body, with my words, or with my heart. I now remember how I abused you through my false speech, through my aggressive words, through my harmful speech, through gossip or slander. I remember how I abused you through my words, spoken or unspoken. I now remember how I abused you through my communications, verbal or non-verbal. My words, spoken or unspoken, born out of my own desires, out of my anger, out of my fears. Words born out of my confusion and my not knowing. But that was who I was then. It's not who I am now, and not who I will be in the future. You have nothing to fear from me today. For the thoughts, for the words, spoken or unspoken, and for the acts of abuse that I inflicted upon you, I am sorry. I forgive myself. For the harm that my words, spoken or unspoken, have caused you, knowingly or unknowingly. I'm sorry. I forgive myself. For the sorrow that my words, spoken or unspoken, have caused you, I am sorry. I forgive myself. I forgive myself now. Take a deep breath in and out through the heart. And let yourself feel your sorrow and your regret for your actions, for your words. As we check in with our heart center, we might note the feelings that we find there. Guilt, anger, conflict, shame, hatred. Maybe you'll find a sense of understanding, maybe a sense of surrender, maybe a very positive, skillful remorse, perhaps, and maybe even some release. Wise, skillful speech is often being quoted as being one of the hardest practices to achieve. But maybe we can set the intention to speak with kindness, to speak truthfully, to speak mindfully. What would it feel like to let go of the self-view of being an offender or offensive? What would it feel like to drop our personal stories and negative identities? Is it possible to let go of guilt and shame? Is there a point where guilt and shame can be put down? That was who I was then, not who I am now, and not who I will be in the future. You have nothing to fear from me today. The second direction of forgiveness is towards ourselves for the hurt, for the harm, and for the abuse that we've inflicted on ourselves. As we continue to breathe in and out through the heart area, we can recite silently to ourselves, I ask for and I extend forgiveness to myself for whatever harmful things I have done to myself, the mistakes, the failures, and the wrongdoings that I have intentionally or unintentionally done with my body, with my words, or with my heart. I now remember how I abused myself through lying to others. I now remember how I abused myself through my self-criticism. I remember how I abused myself through self-deception. How I abused myself through not asking for help. How I abused myself through self-blame. How I abused myself by not speaking to myself kindly. I now remember how I let myself down through my words, spoken or not spoken. My words born out of my own desires, out of my anger, out of my fears, words born out of my confusion and not knowing. But that was who I was then, not who I am now, and not who I will be in the future. I now ask for and I extend to myself a full and heartfelt forgiveness. I forgive myself for not understanding. I forgive myself for the mistakes of the past, for the thoughts, for the words, spoken or unspoken, and for the acts of abuse that I've inflicted upon myself. I offer myself forgiveness. For the harm that my words, spoken or unspoken, have caused me, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer myself forgiveness. For the sorrow that my words, spoken or unspoken, have caused me, I offer myself forgiveness. I wholeheartedly forgive myself. I forgive myself now. Taking a deep breath in and out through the heart, let yourself feel your sorrow and regret for your actions. Checking in with your heart center, noting any feelings that might be there. I would hope by this time in our practices, feelings of resistance and conflict and guilt and shame and anger, self-hatred may be loosening, may be absent now. And we might be cultivating more of a sense of surrender and of wise, skillful, personal remorse. So maybe you'll find some relief, maybe you'll find some release. Remember that we are both the perpetrator and the victim of these abuses. Mindfulness means to remember what needs to be remembered, and particularly remembering what is helpful, what is caring, and what is wise. What would it feel like to drop our negative self-identities? Can we replace them with an attitude of kindness? Can we befriend ourselves? We might remember a phrase used in loving kindness practice. May I love myself just as I am, right here, right now. The final direction of forgiveness is towards those who've hurt or harmed us, to those who've betrayed and abused us, to those who've abandoned us. So we might start this stage of our forgiveness practice by just bringing forward into the present moment the small hurts, the small slights, the petty betrayals, and the minor abuses. As we continue breathing in and out of the heart area, we can silently recite to ourselves, as far as I'm ready and as far as I'm able, I forgive you for whatever harmful things you have done, the mistakes, the failures, and the wrongdoings that you have committed intentionally or unintentionally with your body, with your words, or with your heart. I now remember how you abused me through your lies, your aggressive words, your harmful speech, your gossip or slander. I now remember how you abused me through your words, spoken or unspoken. I now remember how you abused me through your communications, verbal or non-verbal. Your words, spoken or unspoken, born out of your desires, out of your anger, out of your fears, words born out of your confusion or your not knowing. I have carried the pain and sorrow of your words in my heart for too long, and now I put them down. Now I set you free. Now I release you. You have nothing to fear from me. For the thoughts, for the words, spoken or unspoken, and for the acts of abuse that you have inflicted upon me, I offer you my forgiveness. For the harm that your words have caused me, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer you my forgiveness. For the sorrow that your words caused me, I offer you my forgiveness. I forgive you now. Taking a deep breath in and out through the heart. Let yourself feel your pain and your sorrow. Again, just checking in with the heart center, noting any feelings that are there. Renewed anger, renewed hatred. Are we still holding resistance, or do we have a conflict about forgiving? It is possible that we may even feel guilt or shame because of someone else's words. In which case, we really must remember that this deserves kindness and self-forgiveness. Is it possible to let go of the identity of being a victim of these hurts? What purpose does this self-view serve? And importantly, does this self-view still help, or does it now hinder? Remember, we can forgive, but we do not have to forget. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. We're not inviting people back into our lives. When we adopt forgiveness, we're not forsaking justice. Forgiveness and justice can and should be applied together. Forgiveness is a process, not an event. And sometimes this is a very gradual process that requires patience and it requires courage. A gradual process that cannot be rushed and it cannot be faked. When we let go of blame, shame, and guilt and anger, we move away from clinging towards letting go. We move away from aversion towards love. We move away from confusion towards wisdom. We move away from avoidable suffering towards the ending of unnecessary avoidable suffering. We take another step closer to finding that perfect, unshakable liberation of the heart. A liberation from greed, a liberation from hatred, a liberation from delusion. The Indian statesman Mahatma Gandhi said, "The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attitude of the strong." And Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Forgiveness is not an occasional act. It is a permanent attitude." So in holding with great care our pain, our hurt and our disappointments, in holding and honouring our lost childhoods and broken dreams, we can skillfully leave the past behind and move forwards, taking another step closer to the ending of suffering and that perfect, unshakable freedom of the heart. Freedom from greed, freedom from hatred, and freedom from confusion. At the time of the Buddha, there was a monk, a scholarly monk named Vengisa, who was declared foremost in the gift of spontaneous poetic expression. And Vengisa said, "Speak only such words that do not hurt yourself, nor harm others. Such speech is truly well spoken." So I'm going to say goodbye and see you next week. And I'll try and include as many references in the handout as possible. And if I miss any, don't be afraid to ask. So cheerio, look after yourselves, and I'll see you for our final week next Saturday. So bye for now.